1 year ago, almost down to this very day, we heard the news that we'd be moving across the country with exactly 50 days to get our plans in order. 1 year ago, the idea of owning a farm was years down the line in my mind. 1 year ago, we had only owned our first home for 6 months. So, how did we get here? Well, let me tell you. In order to do that, we have to hop a little further back to the dark ages. Okay, not that far, just back to 2020. Which, if we're being honest, could be considered the dark ages. In March of 2020, the world shut down. I was in the middle of my second semester as a grad school student, finally living out my lifelong dream of moving to North Carolina. My boyfriend Taylor had left his job in Michigan after deciding we didn't want to do long distance anymore, and he was looking for work in the Charlotte area. He had just undergone a very promising set of interviews, but then the world shut down. We couldn't live off of my part-time income alone as I went to school, which was now online. So we wrote out our lease through June and had to make the devastating decision to move back to Metro Detroit. We called up our friend a few days before moving and said, "Hey, can we live with you?" 1 week later, a truck packed to the brim with 2 cats, everything we could squeeze inside of it, and ourselves, as well as a storage unit in North Carolina filled with the rest of our belongings, and we were living in Michigan yet again. Taylor found a new, lower-paying position while he waited for an opening at his old company to pop up. I continued my next 2 semesters of grad school online, and we began saving up for a home in Metro Detroit, giving up on our dream to live in North Carolina for the time being. We had saved up almost enough money for a down payment. Then, disaster struck in the form of vet bills. Thousands of dollars later, yes, a lot of thousands, we were back where we started. The rest of this time was a huge blur, but one thing that I definitely remember is feeling an absolute lack of security and direction. I started watching YouTube videos to distract myself, and I somehow reconnected with this love for nature that had always been inside of me, but had been blocked out after years of living in tiny apartments with roommates galore and spending 24 hours a day either working or doing homework and staring at a screen. I started a small garden. I canned peaches for the first time. I grew giant sunflowers. I lived vicariously through these people on YouTube who gave me so much hope, which I'd almost totally lost, that someday life will feel happy again. A whole year later, we began house hunting in a market that felt nearly impossible to buy into. I had finally graduated and started my first job. Taylor got his old job back, and we were feeling a bit more secure. We lost out on more houses than I can count. This housing market was an emotional roller coaster that I wasn't even close to prepared for. But eventually, we found the one. It was 1/3 of an acre, which felt massive at the time, had a full basement, had a lot of character, and was further out of the checkerboard of Metro Detroit, just like we had wanted. It's officially ours. We built a few raised beds before we even closed on the house. That's how excited we were to have a garden. I planted hundreds of garlic cloves while snow swirled around me in early December that year. We painted and decorated and felt so much peace, having finally accomplished this goal we'd been working towards for so long. A few days into 2022, I started to get the itch to look at property in North Carolina. Maybe we could save up more money and buy raw land to at least go visit and work on building something in a handful of years from now. It can't hurt to look, right? Taylor wasn't really into it. He was enjoying the feeling of being settled, which I can't blame him for, but he slowly started to look into property too. It just brought us so much joy and excitement at the possibility of having a patch of North Carolina land to call our own, even if it was just to visit a couple times a year for a camping trip. And then he started to look for jobs. Unprompted, I might add. I think you know where this is going. He applied, he didn't get it, he applied elsewhere, got his name kicked around to some other places, didn't hear back. Until he did. But it wasn't really in an area we had wanted to be. We've always been die-hard North Carolina people. Sorry, South Carolina. Did we really want to move to Charleston? Could we even afford to live in Charleston? Was there even land there? Isn't it just water? He did the interview, and he was informed that he got the job within a couple of hours. The only caveat? They wanted him to start June 3rd. That's 50 days from now. We have a house to sell. There was a lot of stressful panicking that happened in those coming weeks.
We're about to start moving our first boxes. to Marta's house from our house.
But we came up with a solution. We quickly brought home a camper, aka our new home, on April 22nd. We had 1 month to renovate this thing and get it into livable condition. But we couldn't really touch the camper just yet. We had house projects to finish in order to make a little money on our house, solely to offset costs for all the appliances we had just had to buy. We frantically wrapped up our projects in painting, scrupulously deep cleaned and purged the house, photographed it, and got that bad boy listed on the market. We had a tour scheduled the day before our open house, and right before the open house started, they made an offer. Not only did they make an offer, but they made an all-cash offer. Heck yes. The process would only take 2 weeks. Sold. The day before we moved to South Carolina. Talk about timing. So, we live in South Carolina now? In a camper? Now what? I guess let's look at some houses. We toured a lot of houses. We toured some properties with no houses. We made some offers. We realized it wasn't financially feasible for us to do a construction loan now, if ever. We found the one. We made the offer. Sure, it had foundation issues, but we could deal with that. It has a greenhouse already. We went back and forth for what seemed like eons, but we ultimately couldn't come to an agreement. We gave up on house hunting in Charleston for just a minute. Remember way back in 2020 when I told you that Taylor had a promising job lined up, but it got canceled because the world shut down? Well, Taylor noticed it was finally open again, but he just started a new job 1 month ago. We don't want to move again, do we? Well, maybe we do. He applied. I sat outside to work in the 100-degree weather with approximately 145% humidity while he did his interview. Was I sweating from heat or was it the anxiety? I don't think I'll ever know the answer to that. Now we wait, like a long time. We wait so long that we can't think about anything else. We can't look at houses in Charleston because what if we're leaving? Okay, we can look at one more house. Let's go to this open house just to kill time. This house has 2 acres and a garage, and it's huge. We talked to the realtor. Hi, here's my card. I also work in the upstate South Carolina area too, if you're ever interested. Insert jaw drop. Well, Miss Realtor Lady, we are interested. We're waiting to hear back on this job, but we'll let you know as soon as we know. I didn't sleep at all this night. I was sick to my stomach over the fact that we still hadn't heard about this job. It had been a month with nearly no contact. I typed up an email and asked Taylor to send it to the hiring manager at 10 a.m. You know, because we don't want to bother him first thing in the morning. A few hours later, I get this text from Taylor saying, well, I don't have to send that email to the hiring manager, with about 1 million dots afterwards. Let me just say, I've never had such stomach knots as I did in that moment, folks. He got the job. We are moving again to the exact location we were supposed to be in way back in 2020. Over the next month and a half, we toured a handful of properties in this area, mostly with 1 acre and mostly over our budget. There was one property that had 8 acres and it was an absolute nightmare of a house. The property was so overgrown you couldn't see most of it, let alone venture onto it. Of course we picked that one. It had 8 acres, how could we not? Who cares that the house is a wreck? We have a camper to live in. And finally, the day came. We bought our homestead. We sealed the deal in a Waffle House booth over hash browns and coffee. It doesn't get much more southern than that. We knew it was going to take a long time to rehab this property since we're both working full-time too. So we promptly moved our camper to our new front yard the very next day and got right to work. The first thing I did? Ripped down those curtains. Did I mention this house has been abandoned for a year? The plastic container of buggy brown mush, which used to be blueberry muffins, in the sink, and the unplugged freezer full of rotten food made us very aware of that fact. Not to mention the spiders. So many spiders. On day 1, we found out that our bedrooms have original hardwoods. Cool! We also found a whole lot of mold, and more mold, and lots more mold. I spent days ripping out flooring, good old paneling from the 1970s, and all of the trim, while Taylor worked on ripping up the upper layer of subfloor. Everything was waterlogged and moldy, which wasn't surprising since it was raining inside the house on the day of our inspection. The house wasn't the only project we needed to focus our attention on though. So we bought ourselves a shovel, had 10 yards of compost delivered, and got to work on some garden beds to plant our garlic that I had purchased before we even found a house. That's how determined I was. This feels like a metaphor in my life at this point. We also started to machete our way into the wilderness that was our overgrown property. What did we find? A whole lot of trash. We found some cool things too, but mostly just trash. If there's one crop our homestead grows in abundance right now, it's cinder blocks. While I was excited to start working in the garden, Taylor was excited to buy tools. Shocker, I know. We got a riding lawnmower and a mulcher right away. We also broke that mower 2 times right away. But we got the garden and some trails cleared in the process, so it's all good. We put up a new mailbox that wasn't in our driveway, got a garden cart so I could haul compost without using just a Rubbermaid tote anymore, set up a temporary compost station in the garden, and we moved the metal carport to a new spot so we had a place to put our camper. You know, a place that wasn't in the middle of our front yard. As soon as we moved the camper out of the front yard, we replaced it with a huge dumpster. Our house is set down from the road for everyone to see as they drive by. I'm sure all our neighbors were thinking, what the heck are these people doing? And to be honest, we were thinking the same thing. Taylor's best friend came to live with us for a month. He does roofing for a living, and we couldn't have done this project without him. Shout out to Hunter because you're the bomb. As soon as Hunter got here, the ceilings came down. The insulation snow that came down was the only snow I saw this winter. Ah, how I missed the South. Turns out, we're magnets for stray animals. We've had an abundance stop by. This was Sully, named after the insulation because he wouldn't stop trying to eat it. Hunter and Taylor worked hard to get the new roof put on. I was of no help in this matter because, well, I'm clumsy and they didn't want me to fall off the roof. This freed me up to do other things like tagging maple trees in our woods to tap for syrup. More on that later. I, however, spent most of my time priming and painting bedrooms and the bathroom. Who knew it takes so many layers of primer to cover up yellow walls? I swear they got more highlighter-esque with every coat. That's alright, most people hate painting, but I delight in watching a room be transformed with just a few, or more than a few, coats of paint. It started to get quite chilly around here, especially with no insulation in our house. The guys finally got to a point where they could put drywall back up. Ceilings went first. While we were at it, Taylor and I installed recessed lighting because we were not about to stick those grody ceiling fans back up. We did Thanksgiving in the camper. I managed to cook up a feast in that tiny little kitchen. Oh yeah, and on Thanksgiving we also knocked out some walls. Typical Thanksgiving stuff. And now that we knocked walls out, it's time to put the drywall back up on the ones we kept. Finish the entire ceiling and walls besides the living room so we could blow new insulation up there through the hole of the living room ceiling. This project was an absolute mess. What was left after that? Oh yeah, more yellow paint. I couldn't wait to get my hands on that living room. I painted it as soon as the ceiling was in. All the yellow is gone now and I couldn't be happier about it. As we were nearing the end of Hunter's time with us, they had one final project to work on: gutters. We had to pull them all off to do the roof, so new ones needed to go up. They were all broken and leaky before anyway. To this day, we still haven't hooked up the downspouts. We want to start collecting water off of them as soon as we get those hooked up, but alas, we don't have a ladder tall enough. All in good time. Since we were well into December at this point, I decided to fashion a little Christmas tree for our camper out of foraged branches from our property. I was feeling a bit bummed about not having most of our belongings with us still, so I needed a bit of Christmas cheer. Little did I know that we would be spending Christmas in the house, but not for cheerful reasons. You know, how I mentioned all that mold in the house? Well, now we were dealing with mold in the camper too, and a lot of it. Taylor ended up going to the emergency room due to such bad asthmatic reactions to it. A few days before Christmas, I took a day off work, deep cleaned our new bedroom as much as I could, and moved all of our stuff into it. The cats were not very happy about being confined to one room. I'm like, guys, it's really not that much different than living in a camper, but okay, be picky. After moving into the house, well, into the one bedroom, we started to focus our attention on the kitchen. Taylor cut our peninsula in half, and now we have sort of a temporary island. This space feels so much bigger now. I spent most of Christmas Eve deep cleaning our musty, greasy cabinets and trying to get our day-to-day items, like food and dishes, in some semblance of order. Yeah, we got to give one of the cats a bath that day too. She decided to worm her way into the vents and clean them out for us. That was exhibit A of why we're not using our furnace. Did I mention that we still have the original furnace here from 1971? Its sooty as all get out. That'll get replaced someday, hopefully soon. For now, we're digging our 3 little space heaters. They've served us well, other than that week after Christmas when we reached low temps that haven't been seen here in what we were told was 70 plus years. Cool. We must have brought the Michigan weather with us. With a new year upon us and newly living in an actual house, if you can call our construction zone a house, as well as a shift toward warmer weather, we were feeling like we could take on the world again. There's this tree line directly behind our house that's limiting the amount of light that comes through our windows. The tree lines are directly next to the actual forest, so we're taking it out. Don't worry, we're replacing it with plants that will keep the hillside in place, but will allow us to have a better view and more light inside. We started dedicating some time to our future chicken coop area, or as we like to call it, Fort Chimpkin. This place has basically been a 30-foot wide solid wall of prickly brambles and so many multiflora roses climbing high into the trees. They're all out to get you, every single thorn. Down below the garden and Fort Chimpkin, we have a space that will be our future orchard. We got a bit of this mowed before we broke the mower, but we did enough of it that we were able to visualize our property's terraces. Yes, we have berms and something like swales, except they're more like drainage ditches. They all drain into the woods through a series of micro creeks. All this time spent outside was also due in part to the fact that we had zero furniture. Just a few couch cushions, a tiny little TV, and our mattress on the floor. We kind of felt like squatters. It was time to go get our belongings. But first we had to get the camper out of the driveway. It got placed in its final resting place, at least while we own it, up by what we're now referring to as our landfill. We headed out at sunrise on a 12-hour journey, picking up a rental trailer on the way. It was time to get our stuff. Taylor's mom flew down to watch our kitties. Back in May 2022, my best friend Marta happily allowed us to store all of our stuff in her basement. Have I mentioned we have the best humans in our life? They say it takes a village to raise kids, but y'all, it takes a village to start a homestead too, and that's on community sufficiency. A topic for another time. We showed up at Marta's and we were greeted by a handful of other friends who drove all the way just to see us and help us load our trailer. Talk about feeling the love. Although our trip was a short one, we felt so fulfilled after the bombardment of friendship. We loaded ourselves up the next day and headed back to our new home. We have all of our stuff now. Where do we put it? Answer: everywhere. It mostly eventually found its way to the basement. We'll pick through it as we need to find things, but most importantly, we have somewhere to sit. Not that we do too much of that. We had a lot more land to clear and a lot more garden beds to make. I got a little electric tiller because I quickly realized our solid clay soil was not about to be forgiving to me this first year. Although we firmly believe in no-till practices, we also believe in putting food on the table. Tilling our soil this first year is going to do just that. No shame in the food growing game. Do what you have to do, we're not judging you. We're up to 25 garden beds now. Some of them are 12 feet long, some of them are 24 feet long. That's a lot of potential food. It was about time to start our first seeds of the year, and I finally had my seed starting supplies. So I got all the shelves set up and got to sowing. Cold hardy greens, here we come. We wanted to test the limits of this warm Carolina winter, so we also got a super cheap little low tunnel set up. It's working really well. The weather has been so nice, in fact, that we really haven't done much in the house. It doesn't help that neither of us have ever drywalled before. We'll figure it out eventually, but the garden and chicken coop have timelines. Drywall can wait. Speaking of timelines, it was probably too late to tap our maple trees for syrup, but we did it anyway. Spoiler, it didn't go well. We'll try again next year. We think that this warm winter weather really wasn't conducive to it, but we also tapped them probably 2 months late. Oops. One of the best purchases we've made hands down has been our chainsaw. This thing has totally annihilated our property, in the best way. We're making progress left and right with this thing. Hashtag Lumberjack Taylor is living his best life. He wants to try milling some of this cedar up and making us a new fireplace mantle. Don't worry, we'll definitely document that. A homegrown mantle sounds super cool to me. Daffodils in February? Is this a fever dream or do we just live in the South? Speaking of things just popping up, we have a new kitten. He just kind of appeared, and now he's ours. Ricky has made outside work that much more fun. He's a hilarious little companion to have around. Does he count as our first farm animal? I don't know. What do you think? Ever since he showed up, he's accompanied us on every outdoor adventure we've undertaken, helping us map out new garden beds with flags, building a still unfinished hugelkultur bed. We'll get there, guys. All sorts of mulching, flying the drone, and hardening off seedlings. He loves to steal their water. One thing that we've had to exclude him from, however, is clearing parts of our property. We've cleared a large amount of trees. Don't worry, they'll be replaced with beneficials and natives. One thing we couldn't manage to clear without a little help was all the brambles and rose bushes taking over our future orchard. So we got ourselves a little help, in the form of a rental brush hog. Those things rock. We managed to clear the entire orchard, the chicken run terrace, and even some of the kudzu field, aka our landfill, in one weekend. All for an $80 rental. What a deal. Let's focus back on the house projects for a second. Remember how I said our basement leaks? Well, we needed to fix that. The grading in front of our house, partially caused by those bad gutters, was the main issue. So we got some fill dirt to fix that. Actually, we got a lot of fill dirt to fix that. I'm still not sure where the rest of that's gonna go. Over in the garden, we were working on some beautification projects that we're also hoping will be super functional. Cattle panel trellises. Oh yeah, you guessed it. We've got a 24-foot long garden tunnel here, folks. We're just waiting on those peas to grow. Remember how I told you that our homestead's main crop is cinder blocks? Well, that's so true that our entire retaining wall at the driveway is made of them, and lots of pieces of them. Are they broken blocks? Or are they baby blocklings? I guess we'll never know. Either way, they all got painted white, and we planted over 80 strawberry plants in them. We were 25 short. I ordered more. Don't worry. We planted our first large-scale crop on the homestead, potatoes. Jury's still out on how that'll work out for us. Cross your fingers. We've been enjoying our garden so much that we decided to set up a little fire pit area at the bottom of it, so we could admire its beauty into the late summer nights to come. Standing in our garden and staring down at this beautifully wild 8 acres that we have the privilege to call our own is such an absolutely freeing feeling. Breathing in fresh air in the middle of a field or under towering trees whenever I please, trekking through the forest with a kitten in tow who's hopping from tree to tree and following me just because he enjoys my company, navigating a path, taking care not to step on the dozens of little bees delighting in the wildflowers covering the ground, excitedly discussing our future plans for the homestead, which change almost daily, I might add. I can say this is what I've been searching for. This is the feeling I've been chasing. This 8 acres of ours offers endless possibilities. With those possibilities come some obstacles, no doubt. And sometimes we get overwhelmed with how much we've taken on, how much we want to do here. Sometimes we get frustrated that we can't be full-time homesteaders like so many others. But we know we're listening to our hearts, doing what we're meant to be doing. Looking back at how much we've accomplished in just 6 months on this land not only makes me proud, it makes me think back to the devastation I felt in 2020. Oh, how I wish I could have known what the world had in store for us. It's been a wild ride of a few years, and an even wilder ride of just 6 months. It gives me hope to see what our homestead will look like in another 6 months, in 1 year, in 5 years.